Hello, Internet. We have Colonel Stanley F. Botten with us. He was second in command of 2 Recce. Wonderful fellow. He's a man who wrote several books. And now he's here at Legacy Books. And we're going to ask the Colonel to tell us about one of his books. I believe it's the one about survival. So, sir, you're welcome here with us. Please tell us about this book. Where did it come from? How did you write it? I know there's a story behind it, and where we can get hold of it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you guys about. I would like to first of all give you a little bit of history about writing and how I became a writer as such. The background was that I came from a technical college, Johannesburg Technical College, as my background, engineering, and not very much into the academic world of writing and stuff like that. However, I felt that it was important to record things that you're doing. And in my engineering world, you were involved with writing technical reports and then writing papers. I've actually got about 22 different papers published on my professional career. Now, one of the problems I came across, and I started to write early, and the first time that one of my written books it started really in about 1990, when one of the One Recce guys that I knew very well, J.C. Greyling, the late J.C. Greyling, nicknamed Boats, said to me, he said, "Stan, can you put down the history and your background of 2 Reconnaissance Regiment?" And I wrote an article about our experiences in 1975 at Rundu and the background of 2 Recce. And that paragraph was included in We Fear None But God. There's a chapter on 2 Recce, which I wrote most of that, and it's acknowledged as such. And that then I also got involved in, because we did some testing of survival, and there's a book called Don't Die in the Bundu by General Douglas Granger of the Rhodesian Air Force. And being one that's interested in wildlife and nature itself, we decided, a group of us from 2 Reconnaissance, well, they were the hunters at that stage, decided that we're going to try this book. This is going to be a manual now, and we're going to do survival based on this book, because we must put ourselves in the hands of a trippie that knows nothing, and he's been given a manual. Okay, so we said, okay, let's try it and see and prove it. Does it work? And also, which motivated that was a report that one of the SAP doing border duties come straight from Johannesburg streets, and now all of a sudden found himself in the bush situation. And he got lost, he got separated from his patrol, and when they found him, he died of lack of water, and he was sitting at the base of a baobab tree that had 400 gallons of water. He did not know how to read the signs. There would been a change. The most South Africans, especially South Africans, up to a certain stage, had been on the farm and lived on the farm and slept under the stars and knew nature to a certain extent. However, that situation started to change when the men were coming now from Johannesburg and from Pretoria and the cities, and a youngster that never slept under the stars in his life. And the result is that he was now put in what we call a survival situation. Now, if you take a bushman who grows up in the bush and knows how to read the signs and stuff like that, and you put him in the center of Johannesburg, he's now in a survival situation because he's in an environment that he's not common to. So we said, okay, let's just now prove this out and see what it's like. And the first test I did, we did a whole lot of, the manual that led to the book. I have a manuscript here of all of the reports that we did on survival. These reports ended up with Chief of the Army, and we got a very nice letter from the Chief of the Army commending us for the work we were doing. And that was the first one we did, was Operation Kippersol. And Kippersol, I had all the youngsters that took part with me, to write their what they had felt and what they found, etc. And the bottom line was that the Don't Do in the Bundu was nothing better than a terrorist guide to Rhodesia. And so it had a lot of problems. So I started doing a little bit of research on that, and ended up making contact with in Pretoria, the Botanical Gardens in Pretoria, and was introduced to a chap named Hannes Farmeyer. Yeah, Hannes Farmeyer was a botanist, and he was studying plants and doing his, and they gave us some, which we put together, a whole lot of illustrations of the different plants and identification, and also description of what they can be used for. And I thought, well, this is a very useful book. So the second operation we did, Operation Surprise Packet, we said, okay, we're going to go to the same environment. But before we go, we're going to do some training. We're going to do some plant identification at Pretoria Botanical Gardens under Hannes Farmeyer and things like that, to prepare us mentally for a survival situation. In other words, pre-training. We went out, and that was a tremendous success. We learned a hang of a lot. That formed, and the report I wrote, the Chief of the Army asked us then to write a survival manual. And Hannes Farmeyer and myself and a few other guys, we actually worked together, and we wrote the first survival manual that for the South African Army. However, that was written in Afrikaans because it was for distribution amongst the troops only, and not for everybody. So and I talked to friends. One of the problems I had about publishing a book, and I had made contact in the US, in America, in Texas, called Inspirational Writers Association. And because I was a church-going person, and I met these people, and they were very interested in my story, how I came to America. And they invited me to come and join their group. It was actually an association that come together of amateur writers or potential writers that would like to write a book and write inspiration articles and things like that. And they had conferences where they would invite authors and publishers and people like that to help us to form a book. Because when you start a book, there are a couple of, the first paragraph of your book is very important, because that is what's called the hook. In other words, you must get the person's interest. It doesn't matter whether you're doing nonfiction or fiction, that first paragraph makes the reader want to read further. So don't waffle in your first paragraph. And I also found out that at that stage, there were you had to, if you want to publish, there were two ways of publishing. One was through a recognized publisher, and that was very, very difficult, because you had to prepare your manuscript and get somebody to critique your manuscript and then submit it. And then the editors at the publishing group would say, oh, we're not doing this month, and what is the marketplace on this, and how many people, how many books can we sell? That's the bottom line. And you're lucky for them to consider this in 6 months, if you're lucky to get them to consider to publish your book. And the other way was self-publishing. Self-publishing costs you a lot of money, because in the US, you can spend up to $5,000 in self-publishing. And then you've got to buy 200 books. So you're now sitting with 200 books that you've got to sell, and you've got to market, and you don't have the necessary, the market penetration and the people and the contacts. So, and I saw this happen to a few of the other writers that I'd met, and they'd done supper and said, oh, I'm sitting with a room full of these books and I can't sell them, because they were doing this. So a very good friend of mine that was in, and she's been published, she has about 18 books, mostly non-fiction books, story books. And she's an accomplished author. And she said, Stan, what you should do is use a program or use a contact called Create Space. But now Create Space was then taken over. It was part of Amazon. And they then, today it's called Kindle Self-Publishing. And it's controlled by Amazon. And Amazon has a massive marketing penetration that's international. And what you do with Kindle Self-Publishing, you have to register and become an author registered and stuff like that. And you then submit your manuscript to the Kindle Publishing editors. And within 72 hours, they'll come back to you and say, this is good for publishing. And then they will send you a draft, and you could then look at it and see that this is the format you want, or you want to change this, you want to add that. And they will then publish it for you, and you become a published author. Now, the first book I published this way was the translation of the survival manual, which is now called The Basic Principles and Methods of Survival in the African Bush. Now, most of these photographs in there come from the actual photographs that I did in the regional manuscript. So those are my own pictures that I took, and submitted this to them. And within 72 hours, they came back and said, that's good for publishing. And it ended up where you as the author can buy 1, 2, or 20 books that you want to distribute to your friends, and you get that at a highly discounted price. You pay for them, but like, for example, this book, sells for $36 from Amazon, but it costs me $10 a book. So I can actually buy several and sell it to my friends and people like that. And so that became a very successful project. Now, you'll appreciate that some say, oh, this is in Africa. But one of the things that people don't understand, and that is a lot of the plants that are in here are internationally the same. For example, we call a plant we call Rosenkiebos. You probably know Rosenkiebos or Rosenbush. It's actually a grevia, is the Latin name for it. Is known here and used here in the States as a hackberry bush. So they name it differently, but it's the same bush, and it's also featured in the Texas stuff as well. Now, another plant which is common throughout the world, and I'm sure a lot of people have actually pulled these out of weeds and curse them, and that is ankies. You know what an ankie is, or wedge grass is another name for it, or nut grass, sometimes referred to as nut grass. That is internationally all over the world. You'll find ankies and wedge grass. And the biggest problem people have is they see it and they pull it out, and they don't realize that 4 inches below the ground is a bulb, and that bulb is highly nutritious. It's actually it's edible, it's highly nutritious and very pleasant to eat. But when they pull it out, they leave the bulb behind, so it's back again, and it propagates even more. So I never forget when I was with my children in South Africa in the garden, I was showing them what ankies are and how they can get the bulb out. I'd never had ankies in my garden because the children wouldn't leave them alone. They would dig them out and take the bulb and wash them and eat them and enjoy it. So, a lot of it's international as far as that's concerned. So we're really proud of that book. It's work at Hannes Farmer. He needs a lot of kudos for that. I have the original manuscript here in my file with the original photographs we took. And so that became the birth of our survival manual. That survival manual also led to the promotion and forming of Tureki, because the Hannes Farmer introduced me to he was brigadier at the time, Ivor Lemmer, and who was head of security in the SADF at the time. And we talked about Tureki. Now, you may remember in the book We Dare, I mentioned about us showing a movie to the chief of the army about the hunter training. And so in the interim, one recce had been formed, and they had a situation where they had youngsters, national service, doing service with one recce, with the recce, was then recce commando. And when they finished their national service, they were then transferred to one of the citizen force regiments. And they became a misfit because their type of training that they'd had in special forces didn't quite fit in with the parade and everything that goes with a normal conventional infantry regiment. And we were able to find these guys, and they said that became the motivation to form two reconnaissance regiment, to absorb these national service, the volunteers plus absorb national service on that. So that led to my first publication, as I mentioned before, was that the book by Else, that We Fear Naught But God, I had an article, and that was my first publication. My second publication was a book, a chapter in a book called, so it's actually Loving Your Spouse Through Prayer. And chapter 10 there is called Flight to Freedom, which covers my story about coming to America and how the good Lord looked after us and how we became US citizens. So after the publishing, the book We Dare, I started to write originally when I was still in South Africa. That was about 1990 that I started. And we didn't have computers like we have today, and it was all handwritten. I still got all the handwritten notes and stuff like that where I put together, and some of those excerpts were put in, and we fear naught but God. And I said, well, you know, one of the important things is to write down the history of, because your children and your children's children will not know what you did and what happened. So it's very important to have a record of what your experience is. I've also written my own biology, which covers right from the day I was born up until recent, both in my private career, military career, and my professional career. And because I feel I leave that as a legacy to my children. It's not a book I'm going to publish, but I'm going to make this available to my children. They can say, look, this is what Grandpa did. And you know, what did your grandpa do? Did Grandpa write any stories about what he did? No, we don't have that, because people didn't write books in those days. You know, years ago, it was word of mouth. You actually went and chatted to Grandpa, and Grandpa would tell his stories, and some of them would be Boer War stories and what they did and what they didn't do and things like that. So it's important that those memories and those experiences be passed on to the next generation. And that led to the formation of the book. And We Dare, I started to write in 1990, as I mentioned, but I only published the book for the first time. I published the book here in 2018, was when the book was, and that was mainly because of May 12th of May 2018 is when We Dare first came out, and that was published through Create Space before it became Kindle self-publishing, and they did a fantastic job. I was really very happy with the quality and the pictures and everything that they did in the book. However, a lot of the South Africans were rather keen to get copies of that book. And by going to Amazon to buy that book, it was very expensive by the time you paid for the postage and things like that, and it became uneconomical. A South African owner of a small publishing company called Hedgehog Books approached me and said, please, can we publish your book in South Africa? And that would then make it economic so that the South Africans can actually buy a copy economically and not pay a fortune. I think one guy ended up buying my two books, the survival book and the We Dare book, via Amazon in South Africa. By the time he paid postage and everything, it was close on to $90 for the two books. And that's really beyond the reach of a lot of people who are interested in reading it. So when we did that, We Dare, it cost me a total of $3,000. Unfortunately, the guy promoting it wasn't a very good manager, and I could never get the stock to see how many they bought and what was left and stuff like that. And he ended up in financial difficulties where the books were held in a storeroom, and he didn't have enough money to pay the owner of the stores. So the books were held there and they weren't going out. And so I said, well, okay, I'm going to donate and take all the We Dare books and donate those books to Fort Osprey, which is the 5 recce with David Besaitno. And the remaining books we sent up to them and said, okay, you go ahead, sell those books and use the funds to help those that in need in special forces. So that was my contribution. I've written the $3,000 off because he was supposed to pay me commission, never did, and promised me and said, yes, okay, he will pay you, but never materialized. In 2013, I visited South Africa for the first time after 12 years, actually 2010 and then 13, and took a lot of wildlife pictures, as every South African who goes on the game park and etc. like that, they publish books and I don't publish, they got photographs. So I put together an album of books, of photographs, wildlife photographs, which a lot of people actually really enjoyed this. And the comments I had was, oh, can we get, won't you publish that? Can we get that? Because in America, the wildlife people are very fond of wildlife, and they wanted to see these and to show their children what an elephant looks like and what a leopard looks like. And this is one of the pictures that I took in the park. And the comments was, hey, that should be in National Geographic. Well, you know, National Geographic have so many professional photographers that, you know, you'd be one amongst a million. And so I said, okay, all right, let me, using Kindle Self-Publishing, I published my first wildlife picture book, which is like a coffee table, called God's Amazing Creatures. And in that, I have pictures right from even the South Coast. And the weather said to me, you've captured in that picture all the weather conditions. And there's another picture of a sand crab, and I'm sure a lot of us have actually seen this on the South Coast, and all the pictures of the different birds. And this is one of my famous pictures. It's actually used as a backlight. And so that led to that book that we call, you know, God's Amazing Creatures. And it was very, very popular amongst the Americans. The South Africans, not so, because most South Africans have a ton of pictures of their own of the Kruger Park and things like that. Because I really loved the Kruger National Park, and this was a private park that my son-in-law was part owner of on the edge of the Kruger National Park. And I thought that the South African government were very wise. What they did was that, you know, we've got the Kruger National Park with all this fencing to control the movements of the animals and stuff like that. And we've got all these small game reserves on the edge of the Kruger National Park. So they said, all right, they've got to put fencing around their small game parks. Let's remove all ours so we don't have to maintain a fence anymore. That the controlling of the animal movements by the small game park owners. And this resulted that you had a small game park on the edge of the Kruger National Park, and the animals could wander from one area to another. And that's ended up with Ingwalala. And then my most recent one is called Ingwalala 2020. The word Ingwalala is the African word for where the leopard sleeps. Ingwalala. Ingwa is the name of a leopard, and Lala means to sleep. And all those books have been very, very popular. And I published those through Kindle self-publishing. And the Americans love it. And I must have sold close on to 100 books on that. Again, didn't cost me a cent to produce. And I can buy these books for $4 and sell them for 10. So you're not going to become rich as an author, but it's really a pleasure to see the response that the people have. And in addition to that, during COVID-19, I restarted some of my artwork. My first artwork I did was way back in 1972. And I can actually show you one which became, you may recall that we all recognize as an art form. Now, that picture, scratchbook work, became the regimental emblem for then West Park Commando. And I did the original, and when they were forming the regiment, the commando unit, and that picture there became the rondel, and that was worn by the commander. And I did several others as well, things like I was very fond of animals like giraffe. And a lot of these, several of my pictures ended up in the Kruger National Park Museum in Skukuza. So that's been great fun to do again. And my very latest one is a picture which I've named Introducing Junior to Dad. That's the on that one. So it's been a lot of great fun. I appreciate it very much, the opportunity to tell you about it. But don't be scared to write. Sit down, get to a computer. Now, if you're worried, oh, I'm not so good in my English, I'm not so good at my grammar and stuff, there are programs like Grammarly, which will help you. You need to put your thoughts down. Doesn't matter how they sound to you. Put the thoughts down and get a friend to read it. And I encourage you, everyone, to write their story, to tell their story. Because, in the early years, many, many years ago, history and stories were done by word of mouth around the campfire. Well, you don't have that anymore. So that was done by word of mouth. Now we have the opportunity and the science and the technology to publish it. Write the story. Tell your children what your upbringing was, what you experienced. I'm pleased to see that there's a lot of books now starting to come out of youngsters writing about their experiences in the army and at the border and things like that. But there are other experiences as well that you need to write about that can be passed on to your children. I don't know if you agree with me. That is the advice I give to youngsters. And don't be scared to sit down and write. Write a story. They encourage, some people even encourage a daily diary, which, dear diary, this is what I did today, and this is what happened today. And many people have done that, have actually compiled that into a book. But join a writers' association. I'm sure there may be one closer to you where you're at. They will encourage you and they will teach you how to write, how to get the hook and how to aim your story, and whether you're going for religious stories or non-fiction stories about your life experiences, or even fiction. Tell the story. We don't have the fireplace. Most of the time, if we have a braai or a barbecue, I find that's one thing I miss. South African braai, everybody gets around with the beer and they shoot the fat and talk lots and enjoy each other's company and tell stories. In America, it's not so. You end up doing the barbecue and you sit there by yourself doing the meat and stuff like that, and everybody's out inside. So just remember, those things are important. Yapi, what did he do? How did he grow up? Yapi, when he did the Oxwagon, when he traveled by Oxwagon from the Cape to Johannesburg and places like that to what is known as Transvaal. And those are interesting stories. People love to read history and see what it's all about. And I encourage every one of you to write. I still write quite a lot. I do a lot of publishing of technical papers. I'm actually going to be presenting a paper to what's called the Technical Association of Pulp and Paper Industries. I'm doing a paper on testing of what they call a Yankee dryer that makes tissue paper, and testing it was done on that and what the results were. So really, don't be scared, don't be shy. Write your story, learn to write, and use Grammarly if you're scared of your grammar and things like this. Grammarly will help you tremendously. And don't be scared to write. Write the story down. Tell your children what's going on, because there's too little that's been done today. And that's pretty much my story at this stage. In South Africa, every South African male actually had two careers. You had your military career and you had your everyday work life career. And in my work life career, I started off as a lowly fitter turner machinist apprentice at Durban Roodepoort Deep Mine. And from there went to engineering, mechanical drawing and drafting. And in those days, the draftsman was virtually like a project engineer, because he was the one that did the initial design and the pricing and the tender documents and the quotation. And when the project came in, he would actually do the manufacturing drawings and purchasing of outboard items and put it together and make sure that everything go together. Today, draftsmen sit at a computer and do AutoCAD. So these things have changed as far as that goes. And then I found that when you do calculations of the stresses and design of pressure vessels, piping and structures, you have engineering guidelines that tell you you have to have what they call a factor of safety, and it's usually 6:1 safety factor. So you design and calculate the maximum load and the maximum stresses, and you would actually take that and select a material size and physical properties that's 6 times stronger than what the maximum load it's going to see. However, today Materials cost a lot of money, time's money. And if, for example, if an aircraft was manufactured with a safety factor of 6:1, you would be too heavy to fly. It couldn't fly. So they have a factor of safety of 1.2. Now, 1.2 leaves you very little margin of error. So what you can do then is you need to make absolutely sure that what you bring together has no flaws in it, no cracks, no flaws, no porosity and things like that. So they have to inspect that part and to make sure that it's fit for service. This is a very important part. And I saw that in my experiences as well, because bridges used to be manufactured with a safety factor of 6:1. Today, it's 1.5 factor of safety for a bridge. Again, very little margin of error. And we used to call that factor of safety as the factor of ignorance. So really, excuse me, this is very important to do in industry. Everything we touch today, we drive, the motor car you drive, the aircraft you fly in, the train you're riding in, all today have to be inspected. And we do what we call non-destructive testing. That's examining. We X-ray a weld. We do ultrasonic flaw detection to find flaws. We do magnetic crack detection, or a technique that I'm a specialist in. I've become a specialist with more than 50 years experience in looking at the microseismic shock waves emitted by a crack propagating during stress. So you can actually stress an item and detect using seismology techniques and triangulate where epicyclic center, where the noise is coming from, and characterize that to see, is it a crack or is it not? Or is it leaking or corrosion? And characterize, and also know by looking at the loading to see how critical it is. And that has saved many, many lives in that technology. It's an interesting technology. It's used virtually throughout industry. The craziest application I ever did was with the US Department of Agriculture. In a cotton plant, they want to make sure that the moisture and the water is getting to the leaves. Now, in a plant, it has a vein system similar to the human body, which is actually like a non-return valve that flips up, and that pumps the moisture up to the leaves. And using acoustic emission on sensors, I can actually detect that movement of the valve and see that it's getting the moisture. So that was an interesting application. The craziest I came across where the guy was using this technology to detect termites eating the wood in his house, because you can actually hear the bites of the termites with them give off a microseismic shock wave. And that shock wave, he was able to determine the species of termite, because the one has a bigger mandrill than the other. So the bite is stronger. So they can say what species of termite it is. That was an interesting application. One of the problems, one plant, they call me the bug whisperer, because I was able to pick up, using this technology, what they call MICDAM, microorganisms eating away at the steel, and especially on stainless steel, you get what they call MIC damage. And with acoustic emission, I was able to detect this and pinpoint where it was taking place so that they could do the repairs before they had catastrophic failure. And so life and limb is very important. And interesting enough, wildlife and trees, you come back to the survival, trees are living creatures. A lot of people don't realize that. You'll find that animals that feed off the leaves of the tree will only eat a few leaves, and then they will move to another tree. The reason why the tree actually makes those leaves bitter, so that the animal then moves away several trees because the trees give off a vibration that the other trees around it say, hey, there's somebody eating us. And also the drought and stress on trees, you can detect the fiber breakage. As the drought stresses the tree, it starts to form cracks between the modules in the tree. So it's a fascinating technology. And it's one I'm quite passionate about, as you probably realize, because the important thing was the global assessment of the condition of the structure. Is it fit for service? Is there a defect? Is there a flaw? Where is the flaw? How critical is the flaw? So that it becomes life and limb safety factor, because safety is very important. And that's where I'm a consultant in that field these days, because I did my first training in non-destructive testing in Germany in 1968. And I've been in that field ever since. So they call me the guru of gurus in the non-destructive testing world. But I've been able to teach the technology at what we call the San Jacinto Pasadena Technical College, where I teach technicians on how to do the testing and the inspection and quality control. So that's been a pleasure. And I owe all that to my background, and my military background honed me and taught me and prepared me to be able to teach and to pass on. My objective is to pass my knowledge on to the younger generation. Knowledge is useless if it's kept to one person. If it's passed on to the younger generation, you're achieving something that you know, a lot of people are too scared to pass on their knowledge because they're scared of their job. That should not be true. You should be able to share what you know and pass the knowledge on to the younger generation without any fear of you losing your job. Anyway, thank you ever so much for listening to me. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to do so.
Well, thank you, sir. I was smiling here all the time because there's so many other people who I interview, and all of them say to me, man, I want to write a book. Or I say to them, you should write a book. And then they say, but I'm not an author, you know, I'm not a writer. And so we decided, so we're going on legacy books. As soon as I'm back from South Africa, we're seriously thinking of making an entire series, short videos, just to tell people exactly, this is what you do, sit on your ass and start writing. Once you got your manuscript, this is how you can then get it to Kindle. Amazon Kindle will anyway check your manuscript for spelling mistakes.
Yes, they will.
And they will even email it to you and say to you, have a look at it, see if it is right or wrong. And you just do it. And you know what, at the end of the day, if there's one or two mistakes or whatever, it doesn't matter. You will get it tall puristen. You get these Nazis, I call them. You know, they are absolutely. But you know what? With the English language, it's spoken in what, 200 countries?
Yes.
They don't write the same. They don't even speak the same. It's the same language, but it is spelled quite different. So don't let that bother you. But the one thing I can tell you, sir, which we will never allow on legacy, is publisher. I've spoken to too many authors who said to me, Chris, they slipped my money, they've taken this. They never came back to me to tell me this is what they sold, or let's do the reconciliation. Every single author I speak to say to have a story to tell how they've been done in. I recall when I wrote my first book, I actually read the contracts, being from a legal background. So these were some of the biggest publisher houses in the world, in London. And they were trying to take us for a ride. because it was the most magnificent rubbish you could imagine in legal terms. It was one-sided. It was horrible. But now I need to ask you a few questions. Now that I've had my rant about publishers and telling people what's the latest news that we want to do here. If I understand you correctly, sir, this book of yours, the survival one, it will work in other places as well, even if it's written for the Southern African sphere.
Well, the basic principles and the introduction and the background and stuff like that is common throughout the world. And it's therefore the only differences maybe in the plants that you may use, and that you can pick up from your local botanical gardens and people like that on plant identification. But the basic principles of survival are common throughout the world. And you should read it with that and study it from that point of view. And that's available on Kindle. Now, Kindle, you can get the basic principles of survival in Africa for about $2 to $3 from Kindle. And then you've got an electronic copy that you can keep with you. So yeah, it's a very useful manual. And it's a lot of people are starting to realize that.
Well, you know, sir, there's in the military a saying of the 7 Ps. I'm not going to repeat it here because children might be watching, but it has to do with prevention or something, or preparation, prevents, let's call it poor outcome.
Yeah.
So before you go into the bush or you go anywhere, just take the precautions. Just get the book, keep it with you, read it if you can. And should you be in trouble, you know how it is with an insurance policy. Once you have it, you never use it. But once you need it, you really, really need it. So this book of yours is needed.
Yes. Well, it's like they say, a parachute is only useful for when you need it. Now, this is an anagram for survival, and this is really useful. It covers survival, size up the situation, undue haste makes waste, remember where you are, vanquish fear and panic, improvise, value living, act like the natives, learn basic skills. So, that is, I've done quite a few lectures on survival and presentation and stuff like that. So those principles are true in every case.
Well, if we think about it, the South African Army was an outstandingly good professional outfit. Their training was of extremely high standards. So this book, if it was a manual, which you wrote, by the way, and now we have improved one, I can only say to people, get hold of it. But let me get to We Dare, sir. We Dare is, as I understand it, the story of two Ricky. Because they are like the orphans, when they talk to me, they say to me, "Weeskinders, why am I not speaking to them?" And I say, "I didn't know about you." No, really, I didn't know about them. So I'm so glad to find out that there is actually a book on the history of two reconnaissance regiment.
Well, the whole idea of this, I felt that, because in the beginning, two Ricky was basically on the secrets list. And this is why the first call-up of a full citizen force regiment wasn't published. It wasn't known, but in actual fact, it was the first citizen force regiment. Now, this book, a lot of it came from my interview also with Gil van Kerkhoven. Now, Gil van Kerkhoven, who was the lieutenant colonel who was actually in charge of these SA Irish and then went to brigade headquarters. I cover him in this, and a lot of the information that I had in the formation of the hunter training group was based on an interview I had with Gil van Kerkhoven and my own personal experiences. So it's not just say hearsay; it's actual fact, and if you talk about the things that we did and the training and stuff like that, you understand that as the second in charge of the regiment, I have copies, and those were destroyed when they closed the regiment, of all what is known the Part 2 orders, all the movement, and who did what, and when they did it. And I can name dates and people by name, rank, and number because I have that knowledge, that information. And that's why I put this together. And it was delayed mainly because of the cost of publishing it. And I was told outright by the publishers, oh, that's a limited market. Only those who are interested in military would want to read that book. And I would say in South Africa, there's a very high percentage of the male population in South Africa who are interested in reading what that's all about. And Gil van Kerkhoven also published a book through Paul Els called The Saturday Soldiers, which is also about the hunter training group. So, it was really, these are based on facts, not hearsay and somebody's feelings and stuff like that. Because I felt that, and I was advised by a lot of people that you need to put down this history so that nobody knows, so somebody knows. If you look at some of the very famous regiments in the world, they have historians, and very often the adjutant was the historian and had to write, and you had incident books and reports and things like that of very famous regiments. And if you look at the history of the Transvaal Scottish they were in the Boer War, the First and Second World War. So they have a very long history and are proud of their history. And I'm sure there are books written about them. So why not about the modern day regiments like the Recce and two Recce and all the Recces? You had one Recce, 2, 3, 4, and 5 Recce, and people should know that they were there, and the training we had and the things like that was absolutely top class. These were the cream of the South African Defence Force that formed the reconnaissance regiments. But there were a lot of crazy stories that came out. A guy that didn't qualify for some reason or other said, he had to rear a puppy, and then at the end of the week he had to kill the puppy and eat it. So, that total garbage. So you need to know the facts before you listen to the wannabe.
That's very true, sir. When I was speaking to RSM James Tatefer of 1 and 5 Recce, he's something of an expert of talking of these lies, these rumors, these people who comes out. But I must say to the audience here, we did record the colonel for his life at 2 Recce. It is on the Special Forces playlist. So if you want to know about that, please go and have a look. It's really worth your while to listen to what the man has to say.
I've really enjoyed visiting with you, Chris, and the opportunity to tell and to pass advice, because the old people can pass advice on to the younger generation. Don't be scared to write. that's what I really emphasize that.
Well, we are
Don't-
grateful for your advice, sir.
Okay, thank you ever so much. Appreciate it. Well, the picture books I haven't put on Kindle because that's really something you want as a
No, it's a paper thing.
It's a paper thing. So and we did talk to a couple of people in South Africa, publishers, but they were not interested in the wildlife pictures. But the UK and America are very, very interested. They like to show their children. Most of them buy that for their children.
Suppose even here in Europe.
Yeah, Europe would also be interested. They also, but I haven't done any marketing in Europe on those animal pictures. And I feel the most successful has been that God's Amazing Creatures.
Yes, they are amazing.
The pictures are terrific, and people love it. So, and it's something you could page through, and some of the comments I give, for example, I'll give you one. There's a picture of a grey lowery. This is a medium-sized bird that is commonly called go-away bird. It gets its name from the call it makes with a sound like go away. It uses this cry as an alarm and is hated by hunters. It will wait until the hunter is ready to shoot and then make this call, chasing the animals away.
Yeah.
Those are the little stories that I put on each animal.
It's fascinating.
And so it's not just, for example, there's one here. I think I got this one. The Cape vulture, and picture showing Cape vulture feeding on a carcass. So there's not just a picture, but there's a story behind each. For example, I talk about the picture of the kudu, the majestic kudu regarded as the king of African antelopes, with a red-beaked oxpecker on its back. The oxpecker is the friend of the herbivores, as it feeds on all the parasites that bother them. The age of a kudu is gauged by the number of curls in the horn. Fully developed bull will have as much as 3 curls and weigh up to 1,600 pounds. So it tells not just a picture; it tells them something about the animal. So
it's like educational.
It's educational. That's right, and that's where and I'm thinking of seriously putting these in the local school library for the school. So I may donate a couple of those books. I've got to buy some more because my stock has run out.